Hello and welcome to This Really Happened, a place where unbelievable, heart-touching true stories come to life. Sometimes surprising, sometimes bittersweet, always real. Grab a drink and settle in. We're about to begin. The news of the pregnancy hit Sarah like a bolt from the blue, triggering a wave of panic. Her main worry was her parents, who had no idea about their 23-year-old daughter's secret affair. Young and naive, Sarah lived in a world of romantic dreams woven from the pages of romance novels she devoured in the evenings after lessons and later after lectures. These books always featured an ideal hero, a handsome man, selflessly in love with his equally beautiful chosen one and ready to do anything for her happiness. These stories convinced Sarah of the existence of true, unconditional feelings that required no proof. At 20, she met a man significantly older than herself, but so charming that he easily convinced her of the sincerity of his passion. For Sarah, he became the embodiment of the hero from her own romantic fantasies. Their meeting took place within the walls of the institute where Sarah studied. He had come there to give a lecture. Charles Miller's reasoning seemed so profound, logical, and true to her that she listened, holding her breath, and after the lecture ended, she showered him with questions. Sarah studied political science not because her parents forced her, but out of genuine interest. This passion had been passed down from her grandfather, who was keenly interested in the state of affairs in the country and sometimes expressed very insightful thoughts. Her grandfather had worked in a factory all his life, but he followed every government speech and political change with tireless zeal. It was thanks to him that Sarah decided to link her future life with this field. Charles Miller's arrival at the Institute for a lecture, as the city's mayor at the time, was a real event for Sarah. For the first time, she saw the head of the city in person and could hear his views on the prospects for the country's and the world's development. The mayor's talk captivated her so much that she listened without interruption for the entire 2 hours he spoke, while most students in the auditorium were openly bored. Of course, such an attentive listener could not fail to attract Charles Miller's attention. It seemed to him that the girl was fascinated not only by his words, but also by him personally. At least, that was the impression he got at their first meeting. After the lecture, Charles Miller approached Sarah himself. He extended his hand, introducing himself with a polite smile. "Good afternoon. I am Charles Miller, the mayor of this city. But, I believe, you are Sarah? It's a great pleasure to meet you." She shook his hand, modestly lowering her eyes. "Yes, of course. I know you and have heard a lot. Your approach to city leadership is very close to me, and I really liked your thoughts on the situation in the country and the world." "You're interested in politics?" Charles Miller smiled broadly. "In my opinion, women shouldn't delve into this field." Sarah couldn't agree with this, and a short argument ensued between them, which ended with an unexpected invitation to a date from the mayor himself. "Sarah, you struck me as a very intelligent and sensible girl. I hope you understand what my invitation, so to speak, to dinner means?" Sarah nodded, perfectly aware of the situation. The city mayor, a married man with a solid reputation, could not afford to appear openly in the company of a young student, even if her interests coincided with his activities. That evening, conversation with Charles Miller became a turning point in her life. The discussion captivated her more and more. She liked his train of thought, his views were close to her, and she could share ideas with him that she didn't discuss with any of her friends or relatives. Only her elderly grandfather shared her interest in politics. Therefore, meeting Charles Miller became a real outlet for Sarah, an opportunity for multifaceted development in her favourite field. That evening, they only talked, and afterwards, Charles Miller drove her home in his official car. "What will I tell my parents?" Sarah asked as they pulled up to her house, realizing how late it was. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. Sarah felt the warmth of his palm and suddenly felt a surge of special tenderness. Never before had she experienced such warmth, such spiritual closeness as with this man, not young, but endlessly interesting. "Sarah, tell them you got caught up talking with friends. But that's not true. Can't you sometimes tell your parents a lie to hide a secret date with a young man? Is this a secret date between us?" Sarah raised her eyebrows in surprise, bringing a new smile to Charles Miller's face. She remained silent about the young man, not daring to remind such an authoritative figure as the mayor about his age. "You could say that. Imagine we had a real date, after which I would very much like to invite you to a second one." His quiet, velvety voice seemed to enchant Sarah. For a moment, she felt special, a girl whom the city mayor himself was asking out on a second date. At home, her late return didn't worry anyone. Her parents, who worked at the local textile factory, one of the town's main enterprises, saw it as a reason to go to bed sooner. Their daughter, who had chosen politics, a world far from theirs, had their full approval. Not because they understood her choice, but because they saw her clear interest in this unfeminine pursuit and didn't hinder it. Most of all, her grandfather, a passionate lover of political broadcasts, rejoiced, seeing great prospects in her hobby. "Believe me," he told his granddaughter, "politics is a field where few people truly understand things. By learning to grasp its subtleties, you can not only influence the right levers, but also know things that others can only guess at." Sarah understood what her grandfather was talking about. It was at the top that the fates of ordinary people were decided. Being close to these heights meant the opportunity to foresee events and change her life and the lives of her loved ones. Therefore, Sarah had no intention of refusing to communicate with Charles Miller. And it wasn't just about his influence, she simply liked him as a man. Gradually, their communication grew into something more. Without realizing it, Sarah fell in love with Charles Miller, and there was nothing she could do about it. She understood that her feelings were inappropriate, as he was married, but he himself sought her closeness, and she couldn't refuse. Charles Miller was a powerful and demanding man, accustomed to getting his way, as her grandfather would say, by pressing the right levers. He liked Sarah, and he skillfully sought her attention. After 6 months of their secret relationship, Sarah was madly in love and ready to follow him anywhere. He became everything to her, a father, a friend, a lover. All the qualities of the man she dreamed of spending her life with were concentrated in him. Despite her passion for politics, there was a place in her life, as in any woman's life, for love between a man and a woman. She drew examples of such love from novels, as she had no others before her eyes, except perhaps her parents, whose relationship resembled friendship more than passion. A couple of times, Sarah saw Charles Miller with his wife, Eleanor. His wife was roughly his age, just over 50. They had no children and were always together. Sarah never asked him about his relationship with his wife, and Charles Miller never made any promises. They simply met a few times a week. Sometimes it seemed to Sarah that he was just using her to relieve stress, but she knew she couldn't break up with him, no matter how much she wanted to. She was also terrified by the thought that he might leave her for someone younger or prettier. There was a possibility of his transfer to a higher position in the regional government, which would mean moving. She felt she wouldn't survive it, as her love was immense and, as she saw it, unrequited. But for now, Charles Miller remained silent, not mentioning the upcoming changes. Nearly 3 years into their relationship, Sarah felt unwell, and the doctor confirmed her suspicions: pregnancy. She had no idea what to do next. She even doubted whether she should tell Charles Miller, but he found out himself almost immediately after her visit to the doctor. "Were you planning to hide this?" Charles Miller's voice sounded terrifying. Sarah was frightened, unable to bear his anger. She shook her head, grabbed his hands, almost falling to her knees. "Charles, I'm sorry. I haven't even processed it myself. I wasn't ready to tell you." Despite years of intimacy, she had never switched to the informal you. He seemed too old, too authoritative, and she saw how much he liked being addressed formally, how much he valued respect for his position. "Maybe you're not sure it's my child?" Suspicion crept into his voice. Sarah wanted to be offended but restrained herself. She couldn't irritate him. He valued restrained women who knew how to keep quiet. Hysterics and tears were strictly forbidden. "Impossible," she answered firmly. "I haven't been with anyone but you, there's no doubt, and there shouldn't be for you either." Charles Miller smiled and hugged her. "Forgive me, dear. I didn't mean to offend. It's just overwhelming happiness. And my emotions, you know, change every minute." Sarah knew his character well. She endured not only his affection but also his outbursts of anger when he threw thunder and lightning, making her shrink. Charles Miller insisted, "The child must be born." "This is my heir, the only one I've always dreamed of. My wife, unfortunately, has no children. But this baby must be born and inherit everything I've accumulated." "But how will I explain it to my parents?" Sarah exclaimed in horror. "They won't survive their only daughter having a child out of wedlock." Charles Miller calmed her, choosing the right words. "Sarah, my dear, your parents don't need to know. We'll arrange everything. You'll spend your pregnancy in another city, supposedly on an internship. You'll give birth, hand the child over to me and my wife, and then you'll be free." Hearing this, Sarah shuddered. "Charles, you want to take my child, but he's my son. How can I give him away? He's not an object. No, it's impossible." "What do you mean impossible?" The mayor's voice turned metallic. "Nothing is impossible for me, and who are you to decide what you want? I decide here. If I said this child will be mine, he will be. But no one will know that my son was born to some student, my temporary mistress, whom I patronized. Don't think too highly of yourself. You're just a tool." Sarah listened, gripped by panic. Not only was she pregnant by a married man her parents didn't know about, but he was also setting terms: give up the child and forget. All her illusions collapsed in an instant. Instead of a loving and reliable man, a cruel pragmatist stood before her, having made an irreversible decision. Her future depended on him. "I'm not offering this for free, you know," the mayor added, gently squeezing her fingers. "I'll provide for you for many years. No problems with money, housing, and I'll arrange an excellent high-paying job. Only a fool would refuse. And you're smart. You don't want to ruin your life and the lives of your loved ones, do you?" Now his words sounded like a direct threat. Refusal would mean disgrace, unbearable conditions for her and her family. "I don't want money, and I won't give up my son," Sarah cried out, bursting into tears. "I want to be with you, give birth, raise him together, be your woman, even if not your wife." Charles Miller laughed loudly, releasing her hand. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes, not understanding what she had said that was so funny. The situation was desperate, and he was laughing, instilling fear in her. Beloved, yet remaining inaccessible, unknown. "Who do you think you are, my girl?" He finally stopped laughing, looking at her intently. "My wife? The mother of my child? Beside me should be a different woman, well-bred, mature, wise. And you? A foolish, snotty girl who knows nothing about life. Do you think just because I slept with you, you're allowed anything now?" "I love you," Sarah blurted out and burst into tears. She could barely understand what was happening, how she had ended up in this humiliating situation. For the first time in 3 years, she confessed her feelings to him, pouring out what she had kept hidden for so long. He frowned, clearly displeased. "So what? Do you think your confession changes anything? I'm talking about love. I will be the mother, not someone else. I tried to be the best for you. And now I'm just a snotty girl?" "That's right," Charles Miller replied coldly. "Either you accept my terms, or I'll make you regret it." "And what happens if I don't accept?" Sarah asked in a trembling voice, gazing into the face of the man she loved. She hated herself for these feelings towards a man who was trampling her into the dirt, yet still remained the dearest to her. She didn't even have such a connection with her own father as with this married mayor who wanted to take her unborn son. "Your life will turn into hell," he replied curtly. That was enough. Sarah made her decision. She wouldn't resist. A young woman with a child in her arms is unwanted. Her life would be ruined. She was afraid for her parents, for the baby's future. Miller had no children. His desire for an heir was immense, even from a fleeting affair. "I'm already in hell," Sarah mumbled, and then suddenly smiled. She wouldn't object. She was accustomed to obeying, never expressing dissatisfaction. No matter how he behaved, he remained the best for her, and therefore his decisions were right. "You don't know what real hell is yet," he unexpectedly hugged her, pressing her close. She cried softly, burying her face in his shirt, cursing herself and the day she got involved with the man who had ruined her life, making her completely dependent. That night, Sarah barely slept, contemplating her choice. Give birth to Miller's child, get the money, and build a new life. He wouldn't leave her alone anyway, and she didn't want to ruin the child's life. Let him grow up in a complete family instead. Let Miller be happy with his wife and heir. And she would remain in his life as the one who gave him a son, sacrificing motherhood for the sake of the man she loved. "Mom, Dad, I'm leaving for an internship in Moscow," she announced to her parents a week later. Before that, she and Charles Miller had discussed the details at length. Staying at home was impossible, and she didn't want to go to the regional centre. If she was going to change her life, it had to be drastic, to Moscow. "You've never been there," he objected. "You have no idea what a big city is like." "I want to live in Moscow, and I want a good job after... Well, you understand. Right now, with my degree, I can't work because of my condition. I'm losing a year of my life to make yours and your wife's life complete, and I want compensation." Miller smirked, looking at her. He clearly hadn't expected such demands. "Decided not to be petty, eh?" he said with a smirk. "Do you think Moscow is paradise? That you'll make it there? You're empty, foolish, naive. How can you expect anything with a head like that?" He continued to insult her, but Sarah decided not to give in. Before, he had said he would never get involved with a foolish woman, and now it turned out he had always thought she was one. She didn't tell him that he was the one acting foolishly. Sarah was still afraid of his anger. "I've said what I need to say," she replied, trying to sound firm. "If you don't accept my terms, I'll tell my parents the truth. I dream of Moscow. I don't want to stay here or in the regional centre. I want more, and you promised me a choice." "I'm going to run for governor," Charles Miller said. "When I become one, life in the region will change, and you're choosing a huge city where it won't be easy for you, and I won't be able to help, except with money." "I don't need any other help," Sarah cut him off. "Money is enough. You won't let me see the child anyway. You'll take him. Why would I want to see a baby who will be taken away from me? You think I'm foolish, but you understand that I will become a mother deprived of her child." "If you regret it later, there's nothing I can do," Charles Miller said evenly. "You'll be kicking yourself, begging me to fix everything, but I won't help. Keep that in mind." Sarah nodded. She understood she was making a terrible deal, to be without her child, but with money. She had a choice, to run away, depriving him of the child and the ability to threaten her. But she didn't want to. She hadn't yet felt a strong attachment to the baby inside her. She hadn't yet realized the full gravity of the decision. A few weeks later, she was in Moscow. She arrived at Paveletsky station, took a taxi, and gave the address Miller had sent. He had rented a 2-room apartment in Mariino. She drove there, full of excitement, dreaming of unpacking quickly and walking around the huge city. The landlady, waiting by the entrance, gave her an indifferent look. Perhaps she didn't know the whole truth, didn't know why her wealthy, middle-aged tenant, who called himself Andrew, was renting the apartment for this girl. "Andrew said you plan to live in Moscow for at least 6 months, the landlady said matter-of-factly, while Sarah looked around the apartment. Hearing the unfamiliar name, Sarah was initially tense, then she understood. Miller had introduced himself as Andrew. "Yes, that's right. I've come for an internship for at least 6 months, possibly longer." "All right," the woman nodded. "I needed someone for a long term. Keep in mind, Sarah, no parties, no noise. It's a respectable neighborhood. The neighbors are too. Your Andrew vouched for you, promised there would be no problems." "Don't worry, that's how it will be," Sarah replied, already looking out the window, admiring the neighboring buildings with delight. She had never lived in such a place. The apartment seemed huge for a 2-room flat, furnished state-of-the-art. Even the dishes in the kitchen were French. As soon as the landlady left, Sarah dialed Charles Miller's number. "I've arrived. Rest tomorrow, start work on Monday. The internship is real, so you'll have to work for a couple of months." "I don't mind working," Sarah replied. "I'm even glad I can do something useful." She wasn't being insincere. She wanted to work, to develop. After giving birth, getting the money and freedom, she needed to build her life. She dreamed of staying in Moscow, establishing herself here. If Miller decided to pay her off, let him pay in full. "Keep in mind," he said coldly, "no men, work and preparation for childbirth. If I find out you're seeing some Moscow loser, you'll go home. There won't be a second chance." Sarah was indignant inwardly, but kept silent out of habit. It hurt her, who had been faithful to him for several years, to hear such words. She had never been frivolous. She loved and continued to love Miller, despite his injustice. How could she even be with a man who said one thing to her face, but considered her an available girl behind her back? And why hadn't she seen so much bad in him before, as much as began to show when their intimacy ended? "I never allowed myself anything extra," she hissed through clenched teeth, clenching her fists. "I never gave anyone reason to think I was promiscuous." "You had an incentive," he smirked. "You thought it was forever." "I was never sure of anything with you," Sarah replied, listening to another stream of accusations about her provincial naivety. Listening to his insults, Sarah thought silently, just a little more patience, and she would be free. All these years, she had only tried to meet his expectations. Many men had shown her affection. decent men with whom she could have built a family. But she remained faithful to Miller. The conversation left a bad taste. Sarah tossed and turned all night, remembering their relationship. That time now seemed a distant past, pointless to return to. A walk through Moscow calmed her. She walked the streets, looking at the beautiful houses, the expensive cars. She imagined her future life, an apartment in the centre, a luxurious car, a loving man, a family, children, a happy, carefree future. These thoughts made her feel better. She tried not to think about the coming months. It's just work, she told herself, meaning both the pregnancy and the internship. I'll fulfill my duty, get the money, and the opportunity to live better. She comforted herself, vaguely imagining what would happen after she gave up the child. Deep down, there was a glimmer of hope that the mayor would change his mind, take care of both her and the baby. Maybe she would even become his wife, the governor's wife. As long as the child wasn't born, hope lived. The next morning, she went to the office. The journey took little time. The calculating Miller had rented the apartment only 2 kilometers away. Sarah walked, avoiding public transport, where the strong smells nauseated her. Walking along the Moscow streets, she thought again about how caring he could be. It wasn't for nothing that she loved him. He wasn't so bad after all, despite their relationship deteriorating. She was at the administrator's desk at 8:45. She was nervous. This was her first job, a chance for the future. "Here's your pass." A pretty girl handed her a plastic card marked "Guest." Looking at her perfect appearance, Sarah dreamed of becoming just as confident, just as expensive. For now, she was just a provincial girl who got a chance thanks to an influential man. "How do I find the Prospect Company?" she asked, and then someone touched her arm. Turning around, she saw a handsome man in his 30s smiling at her. "Are you Sarah Davis?" he asked. Sarah laughed to herself. No one had ever addressed her by her full name before. She was 23, fresh out of the institute. She smiled at him, noticing the interested gaze of the beautiful administrator. "I'm Sarah Davis." He removed his hand and extended his palm. "Peter Roberts, Deputy Director of Human Resources." "Are you showing me the way?" Sarah smiled, trying to be friendly. How much she liked it here. Only 15 minutes in the lobby, and she was already in love with this life, with these opportunities. Of course. They went up in the elevator. Other people rode with them, in whose eyes the whirlwind of Moscow life was visible. Moscow seemed like a fairy tale. Peter showed her to the reception area. Miller hadn't said she would temporarily act as assistant to the general director, sitting at reception, registering documents, meeting visitors. It was strange for a political technologist, although the position had a nice title: Management Documentation Support Specialist. Peter enthusiastically described the prospects to her after the internship, work as a political PR specialist. Sarah listened, open-mouthed. It seemed she had entered a parallel reality where doors to a completely different life were opening. She liked the work, but she wanted more. She saw the general director's visitors, wealthy officials, future deputies. She wanted to participate in their future, promote someone, be thanked for her work, receive expensive gifts. "You're doing great," Peter told her a few weeks later. She was never late, her diligence was noticed. She was allowed to participate in a PR campaign for a major client. She worked, feeling that she had found her calling. The work brought pleasure, the results were visible. The deputy director's words were pleasant. She was appreciated, her future became more promising. I really like working here, Sarah confessed, smiling broadly at Peter. Besides work, she liked Peter Roberts, and he reciprocated. They had lunch together a few times, went to the cinema, and then he suggested going to St. Petersburg. The general director is thinking about opening a branch, Peter said. We could see both the city and the future offspring of Prospect. Sarah agreed without hesitation. She had almost forgotten about her pregnancy. The term was approaching 3 months. The morning sickness was gone. Sometimes it seemed to her that there was no child inside, only the ultrasound reminded her. She didn't refuse the trip because of the pregnancy. She wanted to see the city, the branch, and be near Peter. Interesting, attractive. Why hadn't she met him earlier? Smart, educated, with a knack for the right direction. His persistence appealed to her. With each passing day, she became more convinced Roberts was the man for her future, if it weren't for this pregnancy. On the other hand, without it, she wouldn't have ended up in Moscow, wouldn't have met Peter. Charles Miller called every 2 or 3 days, only asking about her health and pregnancy. He never once inquired about her work. Sarah also kept quiet about her life, hoping he wasn't worried. She didn't mention the trip to St. Pete with Roberts either, not wanting to provoke his anger and control. "Tell me, who is Miller to you?" Peter asked one morning in a cafe near Leningradsky station, 40 minutes before the train. Startled by the unexpected question, Sarah looked at him in fright. A million answers raced through her head. "A friend of my father's," she lied, feeling a lump in her throat. "Why did you lie?" Peter didn't believe her. "He put in a word for you. I know Miller is going to run for governor. He has good chances. You never mentioned his name, as if you stumbled into Prospect by chance. But it wasn't by chance, was it?" Sarah picked up her coffee cup, covering her face. He would read everything on her face. She needed to hide her eyes, change the subject. But Peter wasn't going to let it go. "Who is your father?" he asked, and Sarah felt a flush of heat. She felt nauseous. Telling the truth about Miller was impossible. "A simple factory worker," she replied. "A friend of Miller's? So close that the city mayor cares about his daughter's fate." Peter smirked. Sarah realized he didn't believe her. She couldn't tell the truth. Everything would be revealed. Her connection with Miller, the reason for her move, the pregnancy. "Yes, a good one," she looked at him confidently. "What's so strange about that? Can't it be? Can't a mayor be friends with a simple person?" There was a challenge in her voice. She had learned the best defense is offense. Many people at Prospect behaved that way, and in Moscow it was better to be defiant than to try to prove something, especially when you were lying. "No, why not?" Peter suddenly smiled. "I was just curious. I know Miller. He doesn't do anything for nothing. I handled his promotion when he ran for mayor. I know what I'm talking about. I heard he has a mistress in his city, young and beautiful. For some reason, I thought it was you." Sarah's heart pounded faster. It seemed Peter knew everything and was just testing her, but she wouldn't give up. She couldn't admit that she was the mistress everyone, even in Moscow, knew about. "If it were me," she replied, not looking away, "he wouldn't have sent me to Moscow. Why send a mistress so far away?" Peter smiled. "Perhaps you're right, although I've heard how influential men dispose of undesirable mistresses. It's a common practice." Sarah remained silent. Indeed, Miller had precisely disposed of her, like an unnecessary part of his life. Something remained between them, but it wasn't a reason to continue. The point in their romance had been made. Peter didn't talk about Miller anymore, but the unpleasant feeling remained. Her mood was ruined. The trip no longer seemed romantic. On the train, she felt nauseous again and ran to the restroom several times. In St. Petersburg on the first evening, they walked for a long time, hiding from the rain. At some point, Peter unexpectedly pulled her close and kissed her. That night, they were together. For the first time in several years, she allowed another man to be with her. These were new feelings, unlike those with Miller. Passion, a bright flash that blinded her. She returned to Moscow a different person. Peter held her hand. Their relationship had moved to a new level. Sarah didn't dare invite him to her place, afraid that Miller would find out. God only knew how he would react if he learned that the mother of his future child was involved with someone else. After a few weeks, the changes in her appearance became noticeable. Her belly rounded, her breasts enlarged. It was becoming harder and harder to hide the pregnancy. Sarah started limiting her meetings with Peter, realizing that it wouldn't lead to anything good. "Why don't you want to come over?" Roberts asked, hurt when she refused a date for the third time. "I don't feel well," she lied, thinking that lying had become her life. Telling the truth was dangerous. If Peter found out, their relationship would be over, and she didn't want that. What she really wanted, Sarah herself didn't understand. She had to decide. In a few weeks, everything would become clear. That day, when Peter cornered her in the break room, Sarah's heart was pounding. She was preparing for a storm. "Why are you running from me?" Peter's voice trembled with indignation. "What's going on? Is there someone else?" "Don't you see? I'm not like most women. If your ex cheated, that doesn't mean everyone is like that." "Then why?" he asked, looking into her face. "Why are you avoiding me?" Sarah sobbed. "I don't want rumors. When the internship is over, we'll see. But for now, I don't want everyone to see what's between us." "What does it matter what others think?" Peter grabbed his head. "I'm crazy about you, and you're hiding." Sarah no longer held back, crying softly. Peter hugged her, pressed her close, then said quietly, "Marry me." Sarah looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, blinked, not believing him. "Are you serious? You want me to be your wife?" "I do," Peter breathed, hugging her tighter. "I'm going to St. Pete for 2 months, to develop the branch. Your internship will end soon. Come join me. We'll live together, get married. I'll help you get a job at the St. Pete Prospect." Sarah nearly choked with emotion. Peter was telling the truth. No one had ever proposed marriage to her. And here was such a promising man, whom she liked, with whom she was ready to go anywhere. What should she do? She was due to give birth in 5 months. Her head was spinning. She had to answer something. "I agree," she blurted out. A few days later, Sarah saw Peter off at the airport. Alone, joyful, and anticipating a carefree life, she wondered how to stall until the birth. A ring sparkled on her finger. They called each other every day, several times. Sarah waited for the internship to end so she could go to her parents. She invented a story about a sick grandmother who needed care. Her grandmother had been gone for a long time, but Sarah genuinely wanted to visit her parents. "I hope your grandmother gets better, and you can come to me," Peter said, worried about the delay. "I miss you. I need you." "Me too," Sarah sighed. "We'll keep in touch. I'll try to come as soon as possible." She arrived at her parents' house. Wide dresses and hoodies still hid her pregnancy. Her relatives didn't notice anything. Her mother and father asked about Moscow, looked at her work record book, admired her intelligence, not knowing how she had gotten into such a company. After arriving, Sarah went for a walk in the park. She sat on a bench by the pond, stretching her legs with relief, turning her face to the sun. August, a beautiful time. Sarah smiled, thinking how correctly she had handled everything, with the child, with Miller, with Peter, with her future. Taking a rest? A woman's voice sounded nearby. Sarah turned around nervously and froze. Eleanor Miller, Charles Miller's wife. Sarah had seen her a couple of times, the rest of the time, photos in newspapers. "Sit, don't be afraid," Eleanor smirked, seeing her fright. "I won't eat you. We need to talk." Eleanor looked good for her 50s. No grey hair, perfect hairstyle, fashionable clothes, skin without wrinkles, looking about 45. "What is there for me to talk about with you?" Sarah asked, moving away. "About what's happening in your life that concerns me and my husband," Eleanor replied calmly. "Or do you think I don't know anything? Neither about you nor about the changes you're preparing?" Sarah remained silent. Of course, Mrs. Miller knew. Miller didn't hide his affairs, and it suited her that he sought pleasures elsewhere. All the property he didn't want to disclose was registered in her name. Even more was registered in her mother's name. Both were satisfied. Eleanor had her business, Charles Miller had his mistress. Both had a strong marriage of convenience. "I know that Charles got it into his head in his old age to become a father," Eleanor said, looking Sarah in the eyes. "He doesn't know that I don't need this gift, not even for free." Sarah looked at her in surprise. "You don't need him?" the girl asked. "But you wanted a child?" "I never wanted children," Eleanor replied, squinting at the sun, then looking at the river. "It's beautiful here. I like my life without obligations to children. I don't want children. Understand?" Sarah felt a chill. What now? They would refuse the child, and she would have to raise him herself. No, that didn't suit her. She had agreed to something else. "So?" she asked in a trembling voice. "What are you offering?" "Money," she shrugged. "Lots of money and your disappearance. I'll pay enough so that you, the child, and your parents don't need anything for several years. Then you'll manage on your own." "That's not what I agreed to," Sarah mumbled, feeling nauseous. "I don't need this child." "Neither do I," Eleanor snapped, stood up, rummaged in her handbag, worth a used car, and held out a business card. "Call me when things calm down. It's better to think with a clear head." She left. Sarah, clutching the business card, trembled. She took out her phone and dialed Miller. "Charles," Sarah whispered, "your wife. She doesn't want the child. What should I do?" Silence hung on the other end. Sarah fidgeted with the business card, waiting. Surely Miller couldn't cancel everything. He wanted a child. He got one. Sarah certainly didn't need him now. She was going to get married. She had plans. "Go back to Moscow," Charles Miller said coldly. "Be gone from here by tomorrow. I told you not to come back, not to remind me. No one should know about the pregnancy, and you, as always, acted foolishly." "But what about your wife?" Sarah insisted. "She doesn't want—" "Shut up, Davis. I'll deal with my wife myself, and you leave." He hung up. Sarah crumpled Eleanor's business card and threw it in the trash bin. The next day, she left for Moscow, not intending to return until after the birth. She told her parents about her new job, a wonderful future in the capital. They rejoiced, not knowing the truth, which would have been a blow to them. She continued to communicate with Peter. The pregnancy seemed a huge obstacle. She was over 6 months pregnant. Her belly was visible. It was October. Her clothes didn't hide it. Her condition became obvious. When Peter visited, she lied again about her grandmother. How long he would tolerate it, Sarah didn't know. But she understood. She was on the edge of an abyss. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. The meeting with Peter was unexpected. She was walking through a supermarket and heard a familiar voice. Her heart ached with despair, with the realization of the end. Peter looked at her, stunned. Her belly. Estimating the dates, he understood. The child wasn't his. "I'll explain everything," Sarah mumbled. It was clear from her fiancé's face that no explanations were needed. What could she say? She lived in Moscow, led him on, was pregnant by someone else. "You don't need to explain anything," Peter said through clenched teeth, holding out his hand. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, took off the ring and placed it in his palm. It was over. Without explanations, without hysterics. A chance meeting in a store, and the end of the story. Sarah was in a panic. No fiancé, no bright future. She was almost 27 weeks pregnant. Miller's control, whose wife didn't want the child. Miller came to Moscow in December, a month before the birth. He was dry, spoke matter-of-factly, condescendingly. He seemed distant, uninterested. "You'll give birth at my friend's perinatal center. After the birth, you'll sign the papers and you're free. I don't need you anymore." Sarah listened in silence, feeling pity for herself, hatred for this rich man who was saying nasty things. A month remained. Miller promised to rent her an apartment for a year, then she would be on her own. Labor began on New Year's Eve. After suffering through December 31st, by 9 in the evening, she was on her way to the center, suffering from pain, wanting to get rid of the child as soon as possible. The doctors, a bit drunk, settled her in and left to celebrate. She suffered, she screamed. A nurse looked in. "Stop yelling! It's a holiday, and you're yelling. Do you think you're the first?" When the bleeding started, the doctors rushed in. Sarah lost consciousness and woke up in the morning. "Did I give birth?" she asked weakly to a girl in a white coat. The girl turned, smiled. "You did. A boy, almost 4 kilograms. A little elephant." "Can I see him?" A few minutes later, the newborn was brought in. Taking him, wincing from pain, Sarah didn't feel a surge of happiness. She held the child, and it seemed like the happiest moment in her 24 years. Small hands, a pink nose, dark hair, everything so familiar, so incredible. Sarah was frightened. The thought of having to give up this miracle became terrifying. The next day, while she was feeding her son, Miller burst in. "What the hell?" he roared. "Why is she feeding him? I told you to take him immediately." He forcefully snatched the child from her arms. Sarah wanted to object, but she saw his rage and fell silent. He carried the child out. She never saw her son again. They brought her papers, and she signed them silently. Everything inside was tearing apart with pain, with regret. But there was no turning back. She had signed the refusal herself. Sarah tried to call Miller, but he didn't answer. A man in a black suit brought bundles of money to the hospital, a payoff. For this money, she had sold her child as she had wanted. But inside, everything churned with self-hatred, with longing for the baby who had become the dearest to her. "We're discharging you, but we recommend you visit a women's clinic," the doctor said sternly, handing her the documents. "You need an examination and treatment." "Treatment?" Sarah asked indifferently. "Why?" The doctor looked surprised. "You had a difficult birth. You've lost the ability to have children. Didn't they tell you?" "What?" Sarah stared at the doctor. What was he saying? A joke? Was Miller finishing her off? "Lost? I can't have children anymore?" "Unfortunately, yes," the doctor nodded. "The diagnosis is here. See a doctor for hormone therapy." Sarah left the hospital on shaky legs. In her bag were documents stating in black and white, infertile, difficult labor, surgery. She could forget about a bright future with a family and children. But somewhere, her son, the only child she had given away, was living, having received money. Another doctor confirmed the diagnosis: panic, hormonal changes. She cried constantly, gasped for breath, was tormented by nightmares. In her dreams, the baby in her arms, snatched away by Miller. In these dreams, Miller was a monster with red eyes, spewing flames. A terrifying man, he remained terrifying even in her dreams. She broke down, went home, looked for Miller with his wife and child. Once she saw Charles Miller with a stroller. She didn't dare approach. She was afraid of him, the man who could destroy her and her family. Returning to Moscow, Sarah tried to forget. She got a job as a secretary, moved out of Miller's apartment, and relocated to the Moscow suburbs. 2 hours to work, 2 hours back. It was exhausting, but she didn't complain. She didn't want a family or children. She transferred all the money from Miller to a children's rehabilitation center, not a penny for herself. The money felt dirty, having defiled her life. After a year, she calmed down. She met her neighbor, David Green. Friendship grew into a relationship. By spring, she moved in with him. "I want you to meet my mom," he announced. "She lives next door. I haven't dared tell her about you." "Why?" Sarah was surprised. "You're 30. Why hide it?" David hesitated. "Mom is still upset about the divorce. She loves Alice very much. She hasn't forgiven me." "Why did you divorce?" Sarah asked without much interest. She liked David. It was good to be with him, but there were no strong feelings like those for Miller or Peter. It was as if her love sensor had been removed. "She cheated," David replied curtly. Sarah decided not to pry. David's mother was clearly not happy with the newcomer. Moscow mothers didn't like provincials. Anne Green believed her son deserved better. "Sarah, what do you do?" Anne Green asked, pronouncing her name unfriendly, looking intently into her face. Sarah, trying to remain calm, replied, "I'm a secretary. By education, I'm a political technologist. I worked at a PR agency, then I quit and became an assistant manager." "Why didn't you continue in your specialty?" David's mother asked curiously, drilling her with her gaze. "Because I'm sick of these officials," she wanted to shout, but she restrained herself, smiled. "Maybe I'll go back someday. For now, I'm happy with the position and salary." "Yes, salaries are good in Moscow," Anne Green smirked. "Not like in your... Remind me, where are you from?" Sarah smiled, feeling the antipathy. The woman, who loved her son to distraction, didn't approve of his choice. A month later, he proposed, and she accepted, not out of great love, but out of a desire for a family, a quiet life, a life without children. She didn't tell him about her infertility. They lived together, caring for her husband, cleaning, and constant thoughts about the child living far away, who didn't know the truth. "I don't love him," this thought stung her. She said tender words to David, but felt nothing but gratitude for the opportunity to live in Moscow. This wasn't love, but a grey, bleak tunnel. "You got married, but you're not having children," her mother said, hurt. "Why don't you have children? Is it too early?" Sarah understood that she didn't like this life. Not because it wasn't the life she had dreamed of, but because the most important thing had disappeared on that New Year's Eve. Sarah learned about David's other life by chance. She left for work, remembered she had forgotten to turn off the soup. The thought of a fire washed over her like ice water. She returned. Entering the apartment, she heard Anne Green's voice. Her mother-in-law was holding court on the phone. And she didn't turn off the soup. What's in her head? Lovers, surely. She was telling David that he had made a mistake marrying her. Empty, foolish, Cold as a fish. She doesn't love David and he doesn't love her. Sarah froze, listening intently. Here they were, the words she needed to hear, cold and foolish. That's how her husband's mother saw her. That's how Sarah saw herself, cursed. For these flaws, she would bear her cross. Did she want this? No. Alice is expecting his child, the mother-in-law continued. Sarah stood in the hallway listening. Yes, Alice is pregnant by him, and David wants to look good, but he hasn't gotten over his love for his first wife. He'll go back to her, you'll see. This provincial schemer needs to be gotten rid of. Sarah ran out into the stairwell but didn't go to work. She went up to the top floor, waited for her mother-in-law to leave, then rushed into the apartment. She packed her things into a bag, wrote a note to David, and went to the station. She needed to go home, to deal with the hell of the last 2 years, to get rid of it. David called halfway there. Having returned, he found the note, confessed. Yes, I can't help my feelings for Alice. Then go back to her. Raise the child, Sarah replied, feeling neither jealousy nor anger. She didn't love him, so where would his love come from? Their marriage was an attempt to forget, but it hadn't worked. Be happy, Sarah said, and hung up. From the station, she didn't go to her parents' house. She headed towards Miller's house. She was going to beg him on her knees, ask for permission to at least see the child. She was ready for anything, just to get her son back. Eleanor opened the door. Tear-stained, pale, she stared at Sarah. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Come to dance on bones?" "On what?" Sarah looked at her uncomprehendingly. "I want to talk to Charles about Johnny." "Are you kidding?" Eleanor asked, and burst into tears, sliding down the wall. Sarah caught her, helped her to the sofa. Then she saw a small boy standing hesitantly near the entrance. Her heart pounded wildly. It was her son. "Johnny," Sarah whispered, smiling. The boy smiled back. Something inside Sarah cracked, a huge iceberg. "Take him," Eleanor cried out. "I don't need him. Now that Charles is gone, your child is useless to me. He was never needed. You forced him on us." "What happened to Charles Miller?" Sarah turned pale. "He died," Eleanor replied with a grim smile. "Heart attack. Take the boy and get out." Sarah walked up to her son, scooped him up. Johnny clung to her neck with his thin fingers. "Who are you?" Johnny asked as they got into the taxi. "I'm Sarah." She looked into his eyes, wiping away a barely noticeable tear. "We're going somewhere, then I'll tell you everything." They were driving to Sarah's parents' house. Ahead lay a difficult conversation, sorting out documents. The hell is over, she thought, squeezing her son's small hand. If this hadn't happened, I would have gone mad. She hugged Johnny, pressed him close. The boy didn't pull away, drawing patterns on the glass. Sarah inhaled the scent of her child, smiling through her tears. She had never felt such feelings. It was simple, unconditional happiness.